The lobby of Meridian Tower smelled like money, not the crass, obvious kind, not cologne or leather or polished marble. Though all of those were present, it was subtler than that. It was the smell of recycled air filtered through machines that cost more than Ethan Cole's car. It was the faint ozone hum of a building that had never once considered the possibility of failure. Ethan noticed it immediately. He stood just inside the revolving door, one hand resting on the handle of a battered canvas messenger bag, the other holding the small, warm fingers of his daughter. He let his eyes move slowly across the lobby, the 40-foot atrium ceiling, the living wall of ferns behind the reception desk, the two security stations with their frosted glass panels and biometric readers. He cataloged it all the way a man catalogs a room he once knew by heart. "Bah," Lily said, tugging his hand. She was 6 years old and wore a yellow raincoat even though it hadn't rained in 5 days. She insisted on it. "Is this the right building?" "Yes. It's very shiny." "It is. Are you sure we're supposed to be here?" Ethan looked down at her. Her face was tilted up at the atrium, wide-eyed, taking in the light that fell through the glass panels overhead in long cathedral shafts. She wasn't afraid. She was curious. She was always curious. "We only need to be right one time," he said. She considered this seriously, the way she considered most things. Then she nodded. They walked toward the reception desk together. The woman behind it, mid-30s, flawless blowout, a headset looped over one ear, was already looking at them before they arrived. Not looking the way she looked at the men in tailored suits who'd passed through the last 15 minutes. Looking the way a person looks when something has interrupted the expected order of things. "Can I help you?" Her voice was professionally warm. The warmth did not reach her eyes. "Ethan Cole." He set his messenger bag on the floor and unzipped the front pocket. "I have a 10 o'clock with facilities. Contract maintenance assessment." He handed her a folded printout. She took it with 2 fingers, as though the paper might be damp. "Facilities." She repeated the word with a particular inflection, not mocking, exactly, but clarifying. Placing him in the correct category. "That's correct." She typed something. Waited. Typed again. "I'm not seeing a confirmed appointment in the system. It was confirmed by email on Tuesday. I have the thread here if you need it." He reached into the bag again. "That won't be necessary." She picked up her phone and dialed an extension, turning slightly away from him. Her voice dropped. Ethan straightened. He looked at the security station to his right. 2 guards. One older, heavyset, bored. One younger, sharp-eyed, running something on a tablet. Neither was looking at him. He looked at the elevator bank beyond the security turnstiles. 8 elevators, arranged in 2 rows. The rightmost elevator in the far row was set slightly apart from the others, framed by brushed gold trim. No floor indicator above the door. No call button visible on the panel beside it. He looked at it for 3 seconds, then looked away. "Sir." The receptionist was back. "Someone from facilities will be down to escort you. It may be 15 minutes. That's fine. There's seating." She gestured toward a cluster of low chairs near the living wall. The chairs were white and angular. They did not look like they were designed for comfort. "Thank you." He led Lily to the chairs and sat down. She climbed up beside him and immediately unzipped her own small backpack, pink, decorated with hand-drawn stars, and produced a spiral notebook. She began to draw. "What are you drawing?" Ethan asked. "The building." She didn't look up. "But I'm making it better." "What's wrong with it?" She scrunched her nose. "The entrance is in the wrong place. If you put it on the side instead of the front, people coming from the subway wouldn't have to walk as far." She drew a careful rectangle and added a small door on the left edge. "Also, the plants should be by the windows, not in the middle. Plants need light." "Bah." Ethan watched her draw. Something moved through him, not quite pride, though it was related to pride. Something quieter. 15 minutes passed, then 20. The lobby filled and emptied in cycles. Men in suits, women with lanyards, a delivery person who was waved through a side door. No one from facilities appeared. At the 25-minute mark, Ethan stood up, resettled his bag on his shoulder, and said, "Come on. Are we leaving?" "No." He took her hand. "We're going up." He had studied the building's layout before coming. Not obsessively, just the way he studied most things he needed to understand. Floor plans filed with the city, elevator specifications from a contractor forum, a 3-year-old network diagram that was almost certainly outdated but would give him a baseline. He knew the facilities office was on the 4th floor. He also knew from a diagram that was definitely outdated that the elevator bank's 4th floor configuration was on the left side of the lobby. He walked toward the left bank, cleared the turnstile with the visitor badge the receptionist had issued without thinking about it, and pressed the call button. The doors opened immediately. He stepped in. The doors closed. He pressed 4. The elevator rose. Lily looked at the mirrored walls with great interest and stuck out her tongue to see it multiplied. Ethan watched the floor indicator. It stopped at 3. The doors opened. 2 men in suits stepped in without looking at them, deep in conversation, one of them gesturing with a folded printout. The taller one pressed a button. Ethan glanced at the panel. He had pressed 4. The button that glowed was not 4. Lily had pressed something. She was still watching her reflections, innocent and pleased with herself. And Ethan followed her gaze to the panel and saw the button she'd pressed, glowing amber rather than the standard white. "Yes, penthouse." He reached for the panel to press 4 again. The taller man finally looked at him. He was somewhere in his mid-40s, with the particular kind of face that had learned long ago to convey displeasure without exerting effort. "This is the executive elevator," the man said. Ethan kept his expression neutral. "I apologize. We'll ride to the next available floor. There's a public elevator bank on the other side of the lobby." "I understand. I'll exit at the penthouse and take another elevator down." The man's jaw tightened. "This floor doesn't stop. The elevator stopped. Not at a floor. Not with the smooth deceleration of a normal halt. It stopped the way machines stop, when something outside the machine makes a decision. A soft triple chime, then silence. On the small panel beside the door, the status display that normally showed floor numbers and arrival times, the screen had gone dark. Then it lit again, white text on black. "Identity verification in progress." The taller man frowned. "What the?" A thin beam of blue light swept across the elevator. Shoulder height. The kind of scan most people in the building probably assumed was routine. A passive security measure. Ambient, unobtrusive. Ethan had helped design it. The screen changed. 3 lines appeared, one after another, with the unhurried precision of a system that had found what it was looking for. Ethan R. Cole. Credential class. Architect. Level. Override authority. Active. The taller man stared at the screen. Then he looked at Ethan. Ethan looked back at him, his face still, his hand still holding Lily's. The other man, shorter, younger, watching the screen with wide eyes, said, very quietly, That tier doesn't exist anymore. They deprecated it." "Apparently not," Ethan said. The elevator began moving again. 3 floors below the penthouse, in a room that most of the building's 2,400 employees had never seen and would never think about. A monitor went red, not the soft amber of a routine flag. Not the yellow of an unverified visitor. Red, the specific, deep, arterial red of a security event that the system considered worth interrupting other things for. The head of building security, a man named Dale Whitmore who had worked in corporate security for 19 years and prided himself on having seen most things at least twice, was standing at the coffee machine when his earpiece crackled. Dale. His deputy's voice. Kowalski. 26 years old. Thorough. Never dramatic. "You need to come back to the room. Give me 30 seconds. "I'd come now." Dale left the coffee. The Security Operations Center was a narrow room on the 22nd floor, deliberately unremarkable from the outside. Its door labeled HVAC Maintenance Access in faded text. Inside, 12 monitors, a biometric router, and a server rack that ran warm enough to make the room feel like the first floor of summer. Kowalski was standing in front of the main display, arms folded, studying the screen the way you study something you don't quite believe. Dale read the alert. He read it again. Ethan Cole, he said. Yes, the Ethan Cole who, the same one, founder tier credentials, architect class. The access tier that was supposedly decommissioned in the restructuring 18 months ago. Kowalski pointed at a timestamp in the lower left corner of the screen. The system didn't just recognize him. It ran a full reinstatement protocol. That hasn't triggered once since this building opened. Dale sat down slowly. Where is he now? Executive elevator. Heading to the penthouse. Who's in the penthouse? Kowalski paused. Board meeting. Miss Sinclair. Full executive committee. Dale closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Get me Sinclair's chief of staff. Already tried. She's in the meeting. Then interrupt the meeting. Dale stood again and locked down the executive floor. Politely. I don't want this to look like Dale. Kowalski's voice had shifted. He was looking at a secondary monitor. There's something else. Dale turned. The secondary screen showed the log of archived files that had been accessed in the last 60 seconds, a standard audit function that recorded any system query above a certain depth. It was running. Dozens of entries, scrolling fast. Files from 6 years ago. Infrastructure records. Code repositories. Authentication logs. None of them had been touched in 3 years. Something was reading them. Something with architect-level credentials had reached 4 layers deep into the building's institutional memory and was moving through it at the speed of a man who already knows where to look. Is he doing this from the elevator? Dale asked. He's not doing anything, Kowalski said. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The system is doing it. It's pulling his records automatically. He stopped. He pressed his fingers against the desk. It's like the building is recognizing him, like it's been waiting. Dale picked up his radio, and 4 floors up, in the penthouse boardroom, a phone vibrated against the polished mahogany surface of the conference table. Ava Sinclair, 39 years old, CEO of Meridian Systems for 3 of those years, built the company's current market position on a combination of exact intelligence and precisely calibrated nerve, noticed the vibration the way she noticed most things that weren't supposed to interrupt her. Immediately, with one eye, while the rest of her attention stayed on the projection screen, where the quarterly numbers were doing exactly what she'd expected them to do. She glanced at the message. Her face did not change. She read it again. Then she stood up. The CFO, Marcus Hale, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, a man who had built a career on projecting the particular kind of calm that functions as authority, looked up from his notes. Ava, we have 12 items left on the agenda. I'll be back. The Korean delegation arrives at 2. I'll be back, she said again. And the tone of it closed the conversation. She was out the door before the projector had finished its next slide. The penthouse corridor was empty when the elevator opened. Ethan stepped out. Lily stepped out beside him, her notebook tucked under her arm, looking at the floor-to-ceiling windows with the focused appreciation of a child who has decided to enjoy wherever she finds herself. The 2 men from the elevator stayed inside. The taller one had not said another word. He pressed the lobby button, and the doors closed between them. Ethan stood in the corridor and waited. He didn't look around nervously. He didn't check his phone. He stood with his bag on his shoulder and his daughter beside him, and he looked at the windows, at the city 42 stories below the angular geometry of Midtown, the distant glint of the river, the construction crane 3 blocks south that was adding 3 floors to something that would probably be finished in 2 years. He had looked at this view before, from this exact angle, through these exact windows. He'd stood here for the first time 7 years ago, when the building was still half finished and the penthouse windows were taped with protective film and the air smelled like plaster. He'd stood here and thought, this is going to work. He'd been right. That was the problem with being right. Bah, Lily said. There are security people coming. He looked down the corridor. She was correct. 2 security officers, moving at a pace that wasn't quite a run but was working hard not to be. I see them. Should we go? No. The officers reached them. The lead one, young professional, trying very hard to look like this was a routine matter, said, Sir, I'm going to need to ask you to come with us, just to the security station on this floor. It won't take long. Of course, Ethan said. They walked to the security station. It was a small room off the main corridor, a desk, 2 chairs, a monitor. One of the officers took a position near the door. The other sat down at the desk and began typing. Lily sat in the empty chair and opened her notebook and continued drawing the building. Sir, can you confirm your name? Ethan Cole. More typing. A pause. The officer's expression shifted. Something he was reading on the screen had surprised him, but he was trained well enough not to say so. And your purpose in the building today? I have a maintenance assessment appointment with the facilities team on the 4th floor. I ended up on this floor by mistake. I was prepared to take another elevator down. I see. The officer typed something else. His radio crackled, quietly enough that Ethan caught only fragments. Sinclair. Corridor. Confirm. Then a sound from the corridor. Footsteps, not the measured tread of security, but faster, less regulated. The footsteps of someone moving quickly because they have chosen to, not because protocol requires it. The door opened. Ava Sinclair was slightly out of breath. She had the look of someone who is almost never slightly out of breath, and was not pleased about the novelty. Her dark hair was pushed back from her face. Her blazer was perfectly pressed. She stopped in the doorway and looked at Ethan with an expression that was not one thing, not surprise, not relief, not anger. It was several things, stacked carefully on top of each other. The room was very quiet. The security officer stood up. Lily looked up from her notebook. Ava said, "Why did you come back?" Ethan looked at her for a moment before answering. "I didn't come back," he said. "I have an appointment on the 4th floor. I took the wrong elevator. I was going to correct the mistake." He paused. "You're the one who ran." Ava stared at him. Then, something in her face, some very precise, very controlled architecture shifted, just slightly, at one corner. "You should have called," she said. "I didn't think there was anything to call about." "There's been something to call about for 3 years, Ethan." He looked at her evenly. "Then you had my number." The security officer was studying the floor. Lily, who had been watching this exchange with great interest, wrote something in her notebook and underlined it twice. Ava did not take him back to the boardroom. She took him to a smaller conference room, 2 floors down, a room with no glass walls, a table that seated 6, and a view of a ventilation shaft, the kind of room used for conversations that were not meant to be observed. She sent the security officers away. She closed the door. She sat across from Ethan and folded her hands on the table and looked at him with the particular attention of someone who has been rehearsing this moment in some form for a long time and is now discovering that the rehearsal was inadequate. Lily sat beside her father and drew the ventilation shaft with careful geometric precision. "I'm going to ask you something," Ava said, "and I want you to answer it directly." "All right. When you came in today, the maintenance assessment, the 4th floor appointment, did you know the system would flag you?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, not evasive, considering. "I knew there was a possibility," he said. "I didn't know for certain. The access tier I was assigned when I built the authentication system was supposed to be decommissioned. I was told it had been removed when I left. I had no way of knowing whether that was true, but you suspected it wasn't." "I suspected the system had been maintained," he said carefully. "Systems I build tend to maintain themselves. That was a design principle. Redundancy. The authentication layer wasn't supposed to be dependent on any individual administrator's decision to keep it running. It was self-sustaining." A pause. "I built it that way because I thought it was the right way to build it." Ava looked at him. Then she opened her laptop and turned it so he could see the screen. It was the archive log, the same scrolling list of accessed files that had alarmed Kowalski 40 minutes ago. It was still running, still pulling records, layer by layer, from the deep structure of the building system. "This started the moment the elevator scanner read your face," she said. "It's been going for almost an hour." "What is it doing?" Ethan studied the log for a long moment. "It's running a consistency check," he said. "It's comparing the current state of every system it can reach against the original parameters I set when I built it. Looking for divergence." He traced a line on the screen without touching it. There, those are the authentication tables. And those are the infrastructure protocols. And that one... He stopped. What? He leaned forward slightly. His expression had changed, still controlled, but something had sharpened behind it. That file hasn't been accessed since the original build. It's the root configuration for the intrusion detection layer. He looked up at Ava. Has the intrusion detection system been modified since I left? I don't know. That would fall under Marcus's oversight. Marcus Hale. He took over as CFO 14 months after you left. He restructured the infrastructure team. Ethan sat back. He didn't say anything else about the file, but something had settled into his posture, a kind of stillness that was different from the stillness he'd carried through the lobby and the elevator and the security station. That had been patience. This was something else. How is Sophie? He asked quietly. Ava looked at the table for a moment. She's 12 now. She has your daughter's habit of redesigning things. A faint sound from Lily, not quite a laugh. She kept drawing. I'm sorry about Catherine, Ava said. I should have said that years ago. I'm saying it now. Ethan looked at his hands on the table. His wife's name, spoken by someone else, still had a particular weight. It was almost 3 years now. It didn't get lighter. You just got stronger. And eventually the difference felt like the same thing. Thank you, he said. They sat in silence for a moment that was not uncomfortable. Then the lights went out. Not all the lights, just the overhead panels. The emergency strip lighting kicked in within 2 seconds, painting the room in cold blue-white. Ava's laptop screen flickered. The ventilation system went quiet, then surged louder, compensating. Ava's phone rang. She answered it. Listened. Her expression did not change, but her knuckles, flat on the table, went white. How many systems? She asked. Then, how long ago? Then, get Marcus. She hung up. What happened? Ethan asked. The primary server cluster just went offline. She was already standing. Cascade failure. 4 core systems authentication, access management, financial ledger interface, communications relay. She looked at him. All 4 are systems you built. Ethan stood up. Lily looked up from her notebook, reading the room. Bah, she said. I know, he said. The server room on the 18th floor was not supposed to be accessible during a Cascade event. The standard protocol locked it to senior infrastructure staff and the emergency response team. There were supposed to be 7 people with clearance. The system, running its own consistency check, had added 1 more. The door opened for Ethan before he could reach the panel. Ava noticed this. She did not comment on it. The room was controlled chaos, 4 engineers at workstations, 2 more on the floor with panels open. The emergency lighting making everyone look like they were working by flashlight. The noise was white and constant. Fans running at maximum, alert tones. Someone on a phone. Marcus Hale was standing in the center of it. He was a tall man. Marcus broad across the shoulders, with silver hair he wore slightly long, and a face that had learned to project authority the way certain mountains project permanence, by simply being large and staying still. He was looking at a tablet when they came in. He turned when he heard the door. He looked at Ava first, then at Ethan. Something moved through his face very fast, very controlled, and then was gone. What is he doing here? Marcus said. His voice was even. He's here because I asked him to be. Ava crossed the room. What's the status? We're isolating the failure points. It's not a breach the external perimeter held. This is an internal fault. Probably a configuration error in the last update cycle. He turned back to his tablet. My team has it. Your team, Ethan said, has been working on it, for he looked at the timestamp on the nearest workstation, 37 minutes. And the cascade is still active. Marcus looked at him. I don't believe we've met. We haven't, Ethan said. But I know your work. You restructured the authentication layer 14 months ago. He walked toward the central server rack, not asking permission, and an engineer moved aside automatically, some reflex recognizing authority before the brain could question it. You migrated the intrusion detection parameters from the original architecture to a new framework. A more current framework, yes. Did you run the full integration test? Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. Of course. Which version? A pause. The standard protocol. The standard protocol for the framework you migrated to. Or the standard protocol for the legacy architecture you migrated from. The room had gotten quieter. Not silent, the machines were still making noise, but the human sounds had diminished. Engineers were listening. Marcus set down his tablet. I'm not going to stand here and justify my methodology to a former employee who wandered in off the street. Marcus. Ava's voice was quiet and very precise. Let him work. Ava. Let him work. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his tablet again and turned back toward the far wall. And his silence was a kind of answer. Ethan moved through the server room the way water moves through a landscape it once carved, not forcing anything. Taking the paths that existed, finding the way that was already there. He read screens quickly, asked 2 brief questions, listened to the answers without visible reaction. He crouched down beside an open panel and looked at the cabling arrangement for 20 seconds without touching anything. Lily sat on a chair near the door, her notebook on her knees, watching her father work. One of the younger engineers, a woman, mid-20s, with close-cropped hair and the particular focus of someone who loves a hard problem, leaned over as Ethan rose from the panel and said quietly, "What do you see?" "The intrusion detection layer is running its isolation protocol," Ethan said. "But it's running the original version. The one I wrote. It doesn't recognize the new framework as a legitimate system component, because when the migration was done, the signature table wasn't updated. To the original layer, the new framework looks like unauthorized code." He straightened. "So it's been quarantining it. Every time there's a system event above a certain threshold, and today there was one. The consistency check I accidentally triggered hit 7 of them. The original layer shuts down anything it doesn't recognize, including the 4 systems that just went offline." The engineer stared at him. "It's protecting itself," she said. "From the update. It's doing its job," Ethan said. "Exactly the job it was built to do. The problem is that someone changed the surrounding architecture without telling it." He glanced across the room toward Marcus, who was facing away. "All I need to do is update the signature table. Tell the original layer that the new framework is authorized." He paused. "That requires architect-level credentials." He didn't look at Ava. She was already at the access terminal. "What do you need?" she said. 5 minutes, Ethan said. "And the password for the root configuration file, if it hasn't been changed." Ava typed something. The terminal screen shifted. Then she stepped back. Ethan sat down. He worked in silence, quickly, with the economy of motion of someone for whom this is not performance but simple memory hands, remembering what they built, returning to it without drama, without announcement, the way a person unlocks a door. They've unlocked 10,000 times. The room was very quiet. Lily stopped drawing and watched. At the 4-minute and 40-second mark, the overhead lights came back on. The alert tones stopped, one by one, like instruments finding their rest after a long passage. The fans began to slow. On the central status board, green replaced red in a slow wave, left to right, the way dawn moves. The young engineer exhaled. "It's back. Everything's back. Full system integrity." No one spoke for a moment. Then Lily said, from her chair near the door. Ba said, the system had never been fixed right. Everyone looked at her. She looked back at them calmly, her notebook in her lap, a pencil between her fingers. "He said it when we were getting ready this morning. He said the building's security had a design he recognized from the original plans, but that some of the layers had been changed without accounting for the interaction effects. He said it was like painting over a door without checking whether the paint would seal the lock." She tilted her head slightly. "I didn't completely understand it, but that's what he said." Marcus Hale was still facing the far wall. The young engineer looked at Ethan. Ethan was closing the configuration file, logging out of the terminal with the same unhurried precision with which he'd logged in. "Mr. Cole," the engineer said. "I'm Claire Denton. I've been trying to find this fault for 6 weeks. The fault wasn't in the part you were looking at. Ethan said. I can see that now. She paused. I read your original architecture documentation. When I joined the team, someone had filed it in the archived section. I thought it was theoretical, a design that got superseded. I didn't know it was still running. The best designs, Ethan said, tend to keep running. After the servers were back, after the floor had slowly returned to something resembling its ordinary function, after 3 engineers had disappeared into a side room to begin the post-incident analysis that would take most of the next week after all of that, Ava found Marcus in the corridor outside the server room. He was on his phone. He hung up when he saw her. Before you say anything, he started. The signature table, Ava said. The update you ran 14 months ago. It was reviewed by the infrastructure team? Of course. Who signed off on the integration test? A pause. Devers. He was on the team at the time. Devers left the company 8 months ago. Where are the test logs? Another pause. Slightly longer. They'll be in the archive. Pull them, Ava said. Tonight. I want them on my desk tomorrow morning. Marcus looked at her. He had 30 years of experience reading boardroom dynamics, and he was reading them now, reading the quality of her attention, the specific temperature of her voice, the way she was standing. He had built a career on knowing when a conversation was one thing and when it was another. This was another. Ava, he said. Whatever Cole told you in there, he didn't tell me anything about you, she said. The system logs did. She pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. The consistency check that ran today pulled 18 months of modification records. The signature table was updated once 5 days after your migration. By a user account that doesn't match any current employee. A ghost account. Marcus said nothing. The original authentication logs from Ethan's build, the ones that would have shown he was co-architect of this entire system, were moved to a restricted archive 14 months ago. The same week you joined as CFO. She put her phone away. I'm not a security professional, but the timeline isn't ambiguous. Marcus kept his voice level. You're making an accusation based on a coincidence of timing. I'm noting what the system recorded, Ava said. My legal team will evaluate whether it's a coincidence. She left him in the corridor. He stood there for a long moment. The emergency lights were off now, the corridor back to its normal warm gold. Somewhere behind a closed door, someone was on a call, the voice rising and falling without resolving into words. Marcus Hale had restructured the infrastructure team the year he arrived. He had archived Ethan Cole's documentation and removed his name from the system's official history, from the patents filed under the company's name, from the architectural records, from the credits on the technical white papers that Meridian had published since. He had not done this out of malice, precisely. He had done it the way a man renovates a house he's moved into, clearing out the previous tenant's things, establishing that the space belonged to him now, that the history began with his arrival. There was a certain kind of ambition that did not need to destroy things directly. It only needed to make them invisible. Remove the name from the byline. Reclassify the records. Move the documentation to a folder that no one was likely to open. Describe the original work, in meetings where no one would question it, as legacy code outdated, superseded, replaced by something better. The better thing was never quite as good. But by the time anyone noticed, the original was gone from the conversation entirely. Marcus had done this with precision. He was good at institutional memory, specifically at shortening it. He had reformed the patent filings by contacting the original IP Council with a revised inventorship declaration, citing what he described as an administrative error in the original filing. The council had processed the correction without scrutiny. These things happened. Inventorship disputes were common in the technology sector. Everyone knew that. What no one had known, what Marcus himself had not known, because the documentation was archived, and the engineers who understood it had moved on, and the person who built it had quietly disappeared into grief, and a workshop in Queens, was that the system kept its own records, not because it was designed to catch anyone, because it was designed to be honest. Ethan had built honesty into the foundation of the thing, the same way you build a foundation that will bear weight, not because you expect the weight to arrive, but because if it does, you want the building still standing. The ghost account had been a convenience, a way to make adjustments to the system without leaving his own signature on decisions that might be questioned later. He had not anticipated that the system would remember. He had not known because the documentation was buried. Because no one still at the company understood the original architecture well enough to explain it, that the system Ethan Cole had built was, at its foundation, designed to remember everything, every modification, every access, every signature. The house had kept a record. It had just been waiting for someone who knew how to read it. They were back in the small conference room with the view of the ventilation shaft. The late afternoon light had shifted. The shaft cast a long shadow. Lily had fallen asleep in her chair, her notebook fallen to her lap, her pencil still loosely in her fingers. Ethan watched her sleep for a moment. Then he looked at Ava, who was sitting across from him with her hands folded on the table and an expression that was doing several things at once. "I owe you an explanation," she said. "You don't. Let me give it anyway." She took a breath. "When Marcus joined, I gave him broad operational authority over the infrastructure side. I was focused on the commercial strategy, the partnerships, the market positioning. Infrastructure was outside my direct attention. I trusted his restructuring. I trusted his assessment that the legacy systems needed to be updated." She paused. "I didn't ask what was being removed." "I should have." Ethan nodded once. He didn't offer absolution, and he didn't withhold it. He simply acknowledged that she'd spoken. "The patents," he said. "The 3 core authentication patents filed in this company's name. I was a co-inventor on 2 of them. My name was removed from the filings. I know, I'm not raising it as an accusation. I'm raising it because it's the thing that matters most. Not the credits on the white papers. Not the archive access. The patents. My legal team is already looking at the filing records," Ava said. "If the inventorship declarations were falsified, we'll correct them. We'll correct everything that can be corrected." She looked at him steadily. "I want to offer you your position back. Not the position you had, I mean a new position. Chief Technology Officer. Full authority over the infrastructure and security architecture. Competitive compensation. And equity. A stake in the company proportional to your contribution to the original systems." The conference room was quiet. Outside, the city was doing what cities do in the late afternoon, filling up with urgency and purpose and the small daily dramas of 10 million lives. Ethan looked at his sleeping daughter. The notebook had slipped to the edge of her lap. He reached over and steadied it. On the open page, she had drawn the server room from memory, the racks, the cables, the engineers bent over their panels, and in the center, a small figure with a messenger bag, hands moving over a keyboard. "I appreciate the offer," he said, "but you're going to turn it down." "I'm going to think about it," he said. "That's different." He looked at Ava. "I have a daughter who's 6 years old. Her mother died 2.5 years ago. Since then, I've been her full attention, and she's been mine. I have a workshop in Queens where I do contract work at my own hours. I can take her to school in the morning. I can be there when she gets out. I can sit on the floor and help her draw buildings that are better than the real ones." He glanced at the notebook again. "Whatever I agree to has to fit inside that life, not replace it. We can build a role that fits," Ava said. "Advisory structure, flexible hours, remote work. You set the terms. You'd give a CTO that kind of latitude? I'd give the person who built this building's brain that kind of latitude, yes." A pause. "Ethan, the system you built has been protecting this company for 6 years. It just locked out the person who was damaging it and waited for you to come back and fix it. I think it's earned the right to have its architect set his own schedule." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "The young engineer," he said. "Denton. Claire Denton. She's been here 2 years. She's good. She's very good. She found everything she was supposed to find with the tools she had. She only missed it because the tools she had were incomplete." He paused. "If I take a role here, I want her leading the infrastructure team, not reporting to me alongside me. She knows the current state of the systems better than I do. I know the original architecture better than anyone. Between us, we'd have the complete picture. Ava looked at him for a moment. Done, she said. Lily woke up when Ethan touched her shoulder. She opened her eyes, looked around the conference room and said, without apparent confusion, "Did you fix it?" "Yes." "Good." She picked up her notebook and found her pencil and looked at what she'd drawn in the server room. She studied it for a moment, then turned to a fresh page and started something new. Ethan watched her. "What are you drawing now?" "The lobby," she said. "But different." "How different?" She held up the notebook. The lobby she'd drawn had the same high atrium, the same arrangement of elevators, the same long reception desk, but the door was on the side, her improvement from the morning, and the plants were by the windows, and in the center of the floor, where the white angular chairs had been, there was a small open space with what appeared to be a bench. "What's the bench for?" Ethan asked. "For when people are waiting," Lily said. "The chairs there now are not comfortable. I sat in them for 25 minutes, and my back hurt." "Your back is 6 years old." "My back still hurt." Ava, who had been gathering her things on the other side of the table, looked over at the drawing. "Can I see?" she asked. Lily considered this, then walked around the table and showed her. Ava took the notebook carefully, with both hands, and looked at it for a long moment. "The entrance on the side," she said. "Because of the subway," Lily said. "People come from the subway. The entrance should be where people are, not where the building wants them to be." Ava looked at the drawing for another moment. Then she looked at Ethan. "She's 6, Ethan said. "I'm aware." Ava looked back at the drawing. "The building's architects are going to hate this." She closed the notebook gently and handed it back to Lily. "Which probably means it's correct." They left the conference room together, the three of them, and walked back toward the elevator bank. The corridor was quiet. The Cascade event had been resolved. The building had returned to its ordinary operations. Somewhere, in the offices below, 2,400 people were finishing their day's work with no knowledge of what had happened 17 floors up. At the elevator, Ava stopped. "There's one more thing," she said. Ethan waited. "The maintenance assessment. The 4th floor appointment." She paused. "You knew the facilities department had a 2-week backlog of outstanding work orders. You knew because you have contacts in the building trades who work in this district. You chose to come in today, through that door, with a legitimate appointment, knowing there was at least a possibility the system would flag your credentials." Ethan said nothing. "You weren't testing the system," Ava said slowly. "You were giving it the opportunity to do something it had been trying to do for 3 years." The elevator arrived. The doors opened. Ethan looked at her. "I told you," he said. "I just hadn't left." He and Lily stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. 6 weeks later, a small piece in a technology journal ran a profile of the Meridian Systems authentication architecture, its history, its unusual design principles, its recent role in detecting what the piece carefully described as an internal configuration incident. The piece was accompanied by a photograph of the original design documents, patent filings corrected to include 2 co-inventors, and a quote from Meridian's newly appointed CTO about the design philosophy behind building systems that could maintain themselves. Marcus Hale had resigned the week after the incident. The ghost account had been traced. The modifications to the patent filings were under review by the company's outside counsel. None of this appeared in the journal piece, which was not that kind of article. On the 4th floor of Meridian Tower, Claire Denton had reorganized the infrastructure team around a new documentation framework, one that required every modification to a legacy system to be reviewed against the original architecture before implementation. It was, she told her team, a simple principle. You had to know what you were changing before you changed it. You had to read the room. She had also, on her own initiative and without being asked, spent 2 Saturdays going through the archived documentation buried in the restricted folder since Marcus's restructuring. What she found was, as she later described to a colleague, like walking into a house where someone had left the lights off and then realizing, once she found the switch, that the whole place was full of furniture she'd been assuming wasn't there. The original architecture was not outdated. It was foundational work that looked simple from above, because all its complexity was load-bearing, invisible, underground. The simplicity was the craft. She filed a detailed technical history with Ethan Cole's name on the front page, clearly labeled, in large type. Lead Architect, Meridian Core Authentication Systems, Year 1. It was a small thing. Documentation usually was. But she had learned, those 2 Saturdays, that small things with the right foundations had a way of lasting. On the 42nd floor, in a corner office that had been unused since the previous occupant had left to join a competitor 2 years ago, Ethan Cole worked on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He walked to school with Lily on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings. On Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, when his work at Meridian was finished, he picked her up from school, and they took the subway back to Queens together. And sometimes, she showed him the drawings she'd done during the day, and sometimes she asked him questions about how buildings worked, not the steel and glass kind, but the other kind, the invisible architecture of systems and protocols and authentication layers, the skeleton beneath the skin. He answered her questions carefully. Not all the way she was 6, and there was time, but carefully, truthfully. Without condescension, he had learned that you could trust children with the true shape of things. They didn't need it softened. They just needed it to make sense. One Thursday in October, they were on the subway when Lily looked up from her notebook and said, "Bah, yes, today at the museum, Miss Harrington showed us how locks work. Old locks. With pins." She turned her notebook around. She had drawn a cross-section of a pin tumbler lock, labeled in her careful 6-year-old printing. "It's like your system. How? The pins are all different heights, and the key has to have exactly the right pattern of ridges and valleys to lift all the pins to exactly the right height. If even one is wrong, the lock doesn't open." She paused. "Your authentication system works the same way. Different layers. Each one has to match. If one doesn't match, the door stays closed." Ethan looked at the drawing. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly how it works. I thought so." She turned the notebook back and added something to the drawing, a small figure beside the lock, one hand extended toward the keyhole. She drew it carefully, precisely. The way she drew everything. "Bah," she said. "Yes, you're the key." The subway ran on through the tunnel. Outside the windows, the dark blurred past. And ahead, around the next curve, the warm light of the station was already beginning to show. Ethan Cole looked at his daughter's drawing. He did not say anything for a long moment. Then, "Go on and finish it." She did. Back in the Meridian Tower lobby, a small renovation had been underway for 2 weeks. The architects had protested. The building committee had reviewed the proposal 4 times. In the end, Ava Sinclair had simply pointed to the original design brief, the one filed with the city 7 years ago, the one that included an entrance access study by the original infrastructure team, a study that recommended, based on pedestrian traffic patterns, that the main accessible entrance be positioned on the building's southern side, closer to the subway exit. The study had been filed and forgotten, like a lot of things. The new entrance was nearly finished. It had a bench by the door. The plants had been moved to the windows, and the white, angular chairs that hurt the backs of 6-year-olds, and probably a few people older than 6, if anyone had thought to ask, had been replaced with something that functioned the way furniture is supposed to function. Without announcing itself, without demanding notice, simply present and useful and quietly, persistently right. Above the new entrance, on the wall beside the door, a small plaque read, "Meridian Tower, Original Architecture Team." The names were listed in alphabetical order. Ethan R. Cole was second. He had not asked for it to be there. He had not known it was going to be there until Lily, on a rainy Tuesday morning in November, pointed it up at it and said, with the calm satisfaction of someone seeing a correction that was long overdue, "There you are. Bah." And he had stopped in the rain and looked at it, and felt something in his chest that was not quite any one emotion, but was related to several, to the 3 years that had passed, to the work that had kept going without him, to the systems that had remembered even when the people forgot, to the small hand in his that had never once doubted he was in the right place. "There I am," he said. They went inside. The The door was where people were. The building was ready for them.